Hello everyone, welcome to Tactica Imperialis and to today's video. Today is going to be another My Thoughts On, and I wanted to talk today about Warhammer 40,000 Apocalypse, the upcoming / about to be out expansion for Warhammer 40,000, which really scales up the game and allows us to fight these grand epic battles on a reasonable timescale, because that's always historically been a problem with 40k. Apocalypse has a great pedigree as an expansion. I've only played a couple of Apocalypse games in my life, but I know that Apocalypse is almost universally popular amongst the community who are able to play it, and a lot of people aspire to play it even if they couldn't do it because of the size of their collections, or for budget reasons, or time concerns, whatever the reason was. Apocalypse just has that special place in a lot of people's hearts in this community. And this new edition promises not only to allow us to fight those grand scale battles, but to fight them more efficiently and with slightly different force compositions. So I've literally just sat down and watched the how to play video, and I've been keeping track of some of the faction focuses as well as the data sheets as they've been coming out. All the data sheets are available online if you want to get them, though you don't have much in doing with mission design at the moment, so you may not be able to play the game just yet, but you can certainly get a good read on how the game's going to go. And I will say very briefly that I am quite a big fan of what they're doing in terms of the overarching core design principle. That is, big games, small time. Apocalypse historically is a game system that could take a weekend or a week very, very easily because the games are just so huge. And they've really tried to both hammer down the amount of time you need to play the game and the amount you spend doing nothing during games, what they know as downtime. So they've introduced a alternating activation system, and they've also done away with the classic turn-based system of one player takes a turn, the other player takes a turn, repeat ad infinitum. They've gotten rid of that in favour of a everybody does everything turn system, a little bit more akin to the old Lord of the Rings games, if you happen to play one of those. So the basic principle is your turn is broken down into an initiative roll-off, a orders phase where you'll tell your units what to do in secret and also draw from a deck of assets. Yes, I'll get onto that. Then your units do stuff and you roll a pile of dice to do your damage, and then you have a damage phase where units run off, take save rolls, and all of that lovely fun stuff. So it really tries to minimize the amount of time where a player spends time doing nothing. They're just a bystander as their opponent does stuff. They've really tried to hammer that down. And they've also tried to reduce the time spent thinking about every single move by breaking down orders and actions from unit by unit to detachment by detachment. They've taken the 8th edition detachment system that they used quite effectively in 40k, and they pulled that straight into Apocalypse. So battalion detachments, spearhead detachments, vanguard detachments, outrider detachments, that sort of thing are all in Apocalypse. And that is how you build your army. You don't build your army by buying X units. You buy an army by buying a detachment and then adding up the power cost of that detachment, and then buying another detachment and adding up all the power cost of the units in that detachment. That's not to say you don't have a lot of flexibility, because you do. It's the detachment system for 40k, and that is exceptionally diverse, but it isn't a case of picking every single unit you like. It's about filling up the force org slots. And this in turn goes on to generate your command asset deck. This is the other aspect of the game that I think is very, very interesting and will really shape the metagame of Apocalypse if there is one. This game is not just a dice roller, it's a deck builder. So you generate or you create a 30-card asset deck to go with your army, and you'll draw from that deck in the orders phase. You can draw up to 10, I believe, although that is influenced by the number of warlords you have in your army, i.e. how many detachments you've got. So rather like in 40k, instead of generating infinite command points at the start of the game based on your detachments, you instead generate more command assets. I believe that's how I interpret it, as a result of your command assets. So it's a very interesting way to keep the flavour of 8th edition 40k whilst also being nothing like 8th edition 40k. It's quite an interesting little way they've done it. So that's all well and good, and I actually do think it's a good system because it achieves the objective of minimizing downtime and also hopefully will speed the game up, considering an entire detachment will act as one. You will give it one order and it will do one thing, maybe two. So there are 3 orders in the base game that you can issue: Advanced, Assault, and Aimed Fire. I think that's their names. So you've got the standard sort of move and do something option, which is move your movement stat and shoot, or move your movement stat, and if you end up in 3 inches / base contact, you can form a fight action and fight in melee. You have the aimed fire option, which means that you can't move, but you get a bonus to shooting and a penalty to close combat. So you want to use this very carefully so that you don't get charged. And the assault action allows you to make a move at double move, so you don't have a random charge roll, again taking some of the dice rolling out of the game for the sake of brevity, and then you have a fight action so you can do a melee assault. This will allow armies to move exceptionally quickly if they can stay in command range. I'll get onto that in a moment. But it means that armies can really close the distance without having to run every individual unit and make charge rolls for every individual unit, because everything just moves at double speed, and then you may get to fight in melee if you manage to connect with your charge. This introduces a bit more consistency to the game, because you can tell if your detachment is going to get charged, as in, is it in range of being charged? No. Okay. Do I need to move? No. Okay. Aim fire. Let's go. Do I really need to close the distance because my opponent is probably going to shoot me in the face? Yes. Assault order. Let's go at double movement. I don't care about shooting. I just need to close distance. And so on and so forth. These orders are all given out in the orders phase, and they're all done face down in secret. So you don't actually issue orders as you go along in the action phase. You issue them all in the orders phase, and then you activate them in a 40k AOS style, you go, I go, you go, I go activation system. So if you've got, let's say, 3 detachments per army, in the orders phase, you'll lay out your 3 orders, you'll pick them. You don't have to, you can repeat them obviously, you just lay them out face down, bang, 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 and your opponent goes bang, bang, bang. They all go down on the board. Action phase. Whoever won the initiative roll-off will decide, okay, I'm going to activate that detachment. They have this order. You can't change it once you've laid it down. That's your order. They're going to do it, and you've got to hope that your opponent hasn't expected you to do that and planned accordingly. It becomes a very interesting tactical game, and I feel like the orders phase is going to take up a lot of time in the early stages of Apocalypse as people work out what they're doing with it to try and work out what orders are going to work. But obviously once you get later into the game and the meta starts to develop, the actions will come to dominate because people will have their orders sort of measured and memorized by rote. That's all great, and they've also talked about the damage system and how that works in terms of you have hit rolls, then you have wound rolls, which are flat rolls, which is on the borrowed from Age of Sigmar, so you don't compare strength to toughness anymore, you just roll a stat on a d12. You have a strength against personnel, which is infantry, and a strength against tanks, which is monsters, vehicles, and the like. And that's fine. So it's going to really speed up the game because you don't have to be consulting different charts all the time. And the other crucial change is that damage and save rolls do not happen until the stage after the action phase. It's called the damage phase. And that means that all your units get to fight at whatever their power was at the start of the turn. Units can get weaker as the game goes on. When they lose, I think, half of their wounds, their attack stat comes down, and some of their other stats come down. But when they're at whatever strength they're at the start of the turn, that is what they'll be at when it comes to resolving their damage. So it's going to really allow, or sorry, minimize the sniper tactics of picking off critical units right away and getting it off the board before it can do something. You can still employ this tactic and get it off the board, but it's going to have a turn on the board where it gets to do something no matter what you do. So you've got to keep that in mind. You can't just plan a Hail Mary, take that out and win the game, because it's still going to get a chance to attack you regardless. Keep that in mind. And then we come to the damage phase, where you take a save roll based on the blast markers that are assigned. So if you score a wound, you take a small blast marker. If you already have a small blast marker, you replace it with a large blast marker. Then you place another small, replace it with a large, take another small, replace it with a large as the wounds come in. For each large blast marker, you take a save on a d6. For each small blast marker, you take it on a d12. Most people's save stats seem to be hovering around about the 5 or 6 range. So I looked at the Tau, for example, and Commander Farsight save is, I believe, a 5+, which is very good against the small blast markers. So if he takes a hit, not a problem. If he takes a really big hit, it's a big problem, because 5 up on a d6 is kind of difficult to make. So it's going to, again, speed the game up, because you don't have to worry about AP, you don't have to worry about save after save, or other invulnerable saves. I think there may be some factions, like Death Guard might have an ability that involves save after save, but general rule of thumb, again, speeds the game along. And then we get to the one part of the game that I'm a little bit unsure about. So every detachment has a warlord, and that warlord has a command range. One of the examples they gave in the video was an Orc War Boss who has a command range of up to 12 inches. Now that's all well and good, but units can end up outside of command range. This is obvious. And if you're outside of command range, obviously you're not going to get an order. I am pretty sure, I don't think they say it outright, but I'm pretty sure units outside of command range cannot receive an order. Okay, so they don't get the bonus, or maybe they don't get to do anything for a turn as you try and maneuver your warlord back into position. Okay, that's annoying. But here's the catch. If a unit is outside of command range and has received a single blast marker, small or large, it's dead. So if you have a unit that is outside of command range, for example, because your warlord was already dead, so you don't have a command range. I don't know how that system works, or if they were pulled out of position because you thought you could make a fight action but you couldn't, or something, or whatever happened that they ended up outside of command range at the end of the turn. If they've taken a single bit of damage, the whole unit's dead, which is really bad. But you think, oh, it's Apocalypse, okay, units die all the time. Okay, fine, but what about those units where you physically can't get them into command range? So for example, if you're running a battalion detachment of, let's go back to orcs, and you have a battalion detachment with 3 units of 30 orc boys, plus other stuff, which you can do in a battalion detachment, that's completely allowed, how are you going to keep all of that partially within 12 inches and still have a cohesive battle line? You can do it, but it's going to really gimp your deployment options. And deployment, by the way, goes detachment by detachment, not unit by unit. So you can still plan this sort of thing out in the first turn, just something to keep in mind. It can get really bad for horde armies of ending up outside of command range completely through no fault of their own, because there's just not enough room. This is a concern that I've got, particularly on terrain-dense battlefields. You may end up with your units just getting pulled apart naturally, and you end up losing hordes of models because of no fault of your own. You can either give up all of your attacks and stuff to stay in command range, or you can just do nothing, and you can die. That could be problematic, and I think that that's something that concerns me on paper, though maybe in practice it won't be half as bad as I'm making out here. The morale system is also very similar to 40Ks, which is you roll a d6, you add, rather than models slain, because there are no models that have died at this point, you add up the number of blast markers you've taken, and if you exceed that total, you take another damage marker. If you have more damage, you also lose damage markers every time you fail an armor save, and when you have taken more damage than half of your wound stats, then your attacks are slashed in half. It's called critical damage. And if you've taken more damage than your wound stats, then you're dead. The unit's gone, and that's nice and understandable. So morale is still a system where units run off, but it's not as crippling as 40k, where you're going to be in a situation of untenable survivability. I don't know if it is a case of for each one you fail by, you add a blast marker, because they use an example where you were 1 over the stat, so I can't really be sure. I might need to listen back to that video a second time. So, Apocalypse as a rule set looks very, very simple, but also exceptionally complicated. I feel like the deck building part of this game is going to put a lot of people off, but it's also going to attract a lot of people. A lot of people have gotten used to having their stratagem decks by now, and so deck building isn't something that they're probably adverse to, and some people will be coming from game systems where we have a lot of deck building. If you've ever played Warhammer Underworlds, you have deck building. If you've ever played Kill Team, I know that has some form of stratagem asset sort of thing going on. So again, you'll be used to having cards. Deck building has become integral to 40k now. Even if you're not deck building and you're just using a deck, you're quite used to it. So I think it's not a problem, it's just something that someone's going to have to get used to, and given there are over 300 cards in the game, though most of them are faction specific, there's going to be a metagame of which cards work and which cards don't. As for the actual dice mechanics, I think that they're very, very solid. I have concerns primarily about the command range system, just because it feels like it could be severely detrimental to Horde armies, because they just get naturally pulled apart and there's nothing they can do about it, and so they just end up losing unit after unit due to just bad command range. But I think it's going to be a very interesting game, and I can't wait to play it. And I love the fact that the system is very easy to get into. It's almost deceptively easy to get into Apocalypse these days, because it's based on detachments, and you're building detachments for your 40k games anyway. So you might have 4 detachments worth of stuff that you were using across a couple of different generations of tournaments. Okay, bang, army, done, go. And you've got an Apocalypse game before you've even kicked a ball, because you know exactly what you're building around. Which I think is really good, and I think it'll be really important to make Apocalypse accessible. Not hard, not easy, but accessible. Easy to get into and hard to master. That's something that GW has really tried to do with some of its game modes. I think Sigmar's done this pretty well. 40k's done this reasonably well in terms of its base games, and 40k has done a fantastic job of making the game universe accessible with things like Kill Team, and then working up to the base game, and then up to Apocalypse from there. So I think Apocalypse is great idea, and I really do want to play it to put all of these mechanics to the test, but it is something that will take a bit of getting used to because of the deck building, the activation system, so that your orders and your plan has to be done and locked in, and you can't react, which is, well, you can kind of react, kind of not react, because you've locked your orders, but you can do alternate activation. So it's going to be very interesting to see how people adapt to it, and I hope that the game does well. I'm certainly going to try it, though the Apocalypse starter box is exceptionally expensive, quite possibly. It might end up being quite expensive, so I don't know if I'll get it right away, but I'll certainly try and get the game, because I do want to try it, and I think it will be a lot of fun to do. So that's my thoughts on Warhammer 40,000 Apocalypse, but that's just me. What do you think? Do you like the systems that they've implemented for the game? Do you think that they work on paper? Do you think they'll work in practice? Are there any things that you think were poorly designed that you'd rather see as a different implementation system? Just let me know your thoughts. I'm always interested to see what you have to say. But now though, that's all. Thank you very much for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Bye for now.